If you can be making your way to find a seat, we'll be starting in Daniel chapter 8 here in just a moment. It is wonderful to see everyone here and to see so many visiting faces. It's an encouragement to have each and every one of you here. We hope that you'll enjoy the study of Daniel as we've been doing on Sunday mornings. Before we begin, let's start with a word of prayer. Our Almighty God, the Ancient of Days, the Creator of all things, thank you for your word, which stands as insight to who you are and to learn your plan for salvation. God, as we study Daniel, we recognize that you are revealing not only to Daniel, but also to us, that you are a God of order and design, and that despite whatever the world looks like around us, we can know that you are in control and that you will work all things for good. Thank you for this time we have to study your word, to learn about you, to encourage one another, to grow in our faith, because we can see that you are a faithful God. Help us to discern these things and understand what you would have us to learn as we study this morning. It's in your Son, our most precious Savior's name, that we pray. Amen. All right. Daniel chapter 8. We'll begin by reading verses 1 through 4. And then we'll take a moment to be able to make notes or mark any questions you might have, and then begin our discussion. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. And I saw in the vision, and when I saw, I was in Susa, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was in the Ulai Canal. I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had 2 horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward. No beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased and became great. All right, take a moment to mark that up or consider the text, and then we'll talk. All right. Again, I'll urge us, like we did in chapter 7. We are seeing a vision. Daniel will reveal to us the meaning of the vision later in the chapter, so let's not, as best as we can, let's not jump to making parallels to where this lives out in history. We want to see the vision the way Daniel is seeing the vision to begin with. So what do we notice, or what questions do we have? You got it.
Is this where he starts writing in Hebrew again? You've probably already talked about this, but I don't remember.
Good, yeah. So if we go back to the chart at the beginning of the book, you bring up a great point, that the middle section, chapters 2 through chapter 7, is written in Aramaic, and now we're going back in chapter 8 to the Hebrew language. And she asks, is there a particular reason? I would say yes, and it's partly on us to figure out what that reason is. Because he doesn't say, okay? And so that'll be part of what we try to discover as we go through this. Let's dig in more into the vision, and then maybe we can start to figure out why he switches to Hebrew in chapter 8. So what else do you notice about the vision? Or what questions do you have? Miss Kay, then Gary, and then Mark. I saw all three go up at the same time.
Well, Belshazzar, is he any relation to Esther?
I would say I don't believe so. I did not look that up. What we do have is Belshazzar back in chapter 5. I had to work back through the book. Belshazzar's in chapter 5, which is he's reigning in Babylon at the time. So he would be a Babylonian king. And so you have, I would imagine that Esther is not related since she is from Hebrew lineage. Does that make sense? Follow-up question to that?
Susa, and she was in Susa, wasn't she?
Okay, so you're seeing a connection here. So what happened is Daniel is saying this is during the 3rd year of King Belshazzar. So Belshazzar's reigning in Babylon, and so that puts us about what time? Did anyone look that up or remember from our chart? What year are we in then? We're at about 547 BC, okay? So we're at about 547 BC. Daniel then clarifies, this is after the first vision that appeared to me. Well, what was his first vision he recorded? Chapter 7, which we think happens about 549 BC. So we're 2 years after the vision of the 4 beasts. And Daniel says, I get another vision. And when I wake up in this vision and start seeing everything, where am I? I'm in Susa. He's not saying Belshazzar's in Susa. Daniel is. Daniel is in Susa and starts seeing this vision. And so we have then the connection, like you mentioned, to Esther, which she is dwelling in Susa. And so we see that paralleling of history here. You're asking all the questions I didn't think of. Why are you doing this right out the gate? Does anyone know? I'll open that to the floor. Does anyone know of Artaxerxes? Is that what Xerxes would have been king at the same time in Susa? Let me think that through. Xerxes would... Yeah, Persian king. So he would be later. Thank you. Getting the story straight in my head. But possibly around a similar time frame, Xerxes might have been starting to reign and come to his own in Susa. And we're going to see that this reveals that there might be some parallel to that thought by the time we get later in the text. Okay, so for the sake of Xerxes being in reign, and there's a switch away from Aramaic because why exactly?
Well, we know that Esther and Mordecai, there was a large contingent of Hebrews in the country.
Mm.
So if it was about that time, it would maybe make sense.
Okay, so maybe that could be one reason, because the Hebrews have continued to grow and flourish in the lands where they are, and now it's shifting that narrative. We'll keep that in thought. Gary had a thought here.
Well, the ram is charging in 3 directions. I wonder what's in the east.
Yeah, well, that's where he came from.
Maybe it's the,
If you're charging to the west first, where did you come from? From the east. And in biblical narrative, the east is the place of the world. It's the place away from God. When man was kicked out of the garden, which direction was he kicked? To the east. When you wanted to come into the temple and into the tabernacle, you had to enter in through the east gate. You were coming out of the world into the presence of God. And so you have this ram coming in from the east and trying to conquer the land of God or these other nations. But idea of east being, it's a wicked nation. So, and we see that. I mean, pretty much every nation that rose up was wicked in some way. Mark had another thought here.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the 2 years. This is 2 years later,
Yeah.
and Daniel's specific position is he's a nobody to this king. And so God is communicating these things to him during a time when he has the time to dwell on these things and consider these things. And during that time, we do see this switch over back to Hebrew. And I was mentioning something with Gary earlier, that these are messages to people and to the kings as well. We saw that section where he's dealing specifically to the kings. And I see this as a message to the Hebrews who are still in captivity. And we're going to see later, Daniel himself is looking for, hey, it's time. What's
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah.
So he's wondering about things, and I think God is simply trying to say, I'm still in control here.
Sure. And we're going to see just a little bit as we get deeper into the text, we'll see some implications of why these visions matter to the Hebrews specifically, maybe in a way they hadn't considered before. And so we're going to continue to develop that idea. Daniel 8, 1 through 4, anything else that you see in there? There's some other interesting things going on. So we have this ram going in 3 directions. Mark's going to go another round, and then Barry.
Nothing real significant. It's just the difference between the animal that we see here and the predatory type animals we saw in the last vision.
Okay.
That's all.
So we're seeing, as we'll talk about, as specific kingdoms and kings that it's representing, but you have this idea that the animal has shifted, and it looks a lot more natural. It doesn't look as supernatural as the lion with the wings and then the bear that's raised up on its side with all this gnarly stuff hanging out of its mouth, and then you've got this 4-headed leopard, and it's all this other stuff that looks weird with 4 wings, and this is very natural looking. You would expect to see a ram somewhere in that land. Barry, and then Steve.
I'm sorry, I missed it. Did we have a year for this?
I had it around 547 BC.
Okay, because I have 539.
So
And if it was 539, then that would be 1 year after Cyrus took over.
Sure.
So now Cyrus takes over, moves the capital to Susa. That's why I've got it in my stuff. So
Okay, I'll have to go back and double check that. The lining. So how would you reconcile the 3rd year of King Belshazzar
because that's when
with 539?
with 539.
Yeah,
When did Belshazzar begin his reign?
I had him around the 549, 550.
Yeah. Well, Belshazzar was there, but he was a vassal king, and Cyrus is moving his capital, and so this takes time,
Sure.
and so he moves his capital in 540.
Okay, and so it's possible
I don't know.
then.
Some of these dates are kind of squishy because
Yeah.
it depends on who you listen to.
Sure. So I guess the way I would reconcile that, see if this works for you, Barry, is that Daniel is getting this vision in the 3rd year of Belshazzar. And what is it talking about? The things that are going to happen in 539 and the things that are going to happen in the future. And so he's getting this vision of things that will happen. And in fact, he gets told by the end of this chapter, these aren't for now. These are for later. So seal them up. You'll see that they come true later. So it would allow for the vision to happen in 547, but speak of Susa and all the things that are going to happen in 539, 540, all of that.
Okay, but he was in Susa.
In the vision. And I think that's where we have to be careful, is he is literally placing this in a historical context, verse 1, saying this is in the 3rd year of Belshazzar. So that would put us 547. And I saw a vision, and when I woke up in this vision, I was in Susa. So I think that's like anytime we have a vision where we wake up from a dream and we go, wow, that seemed real. But when did that happen? I don't know. There's no real timing to it, and we don't get a specific date or time here. And so he's getting this vision referring to the things that will happen during Cyrus's reign and these other things. Scott.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up as he's charging and all of that, no beast can stand before him. So there's not another beast that looks like it could do anything against him. He seems to have all power, and there's no one who could rescue from his power. And I think we're going to see that again.
Yes.
And there's something there. I don't know if I should just go into it or not, but
That's up to you.
yeah, I mean, what I see here,
Yeah.
I guess I'll just say it, is, this is written in Hebrew. You've got the captives that need to know moving forward. There's something for them. There's hope and things like that God, you mentioned it in your prayer, and you've mentioned it, it's been mentioned too, that God is in control behind the scenes. And so this seems like it's a losing battle. You're not gonna win in this. He has the power. This beast has the power, is taking over, and no one can rescue from that.
Yeah.
And yet, we're going to see that God's behind the whole thing, and there's hope there, even when your world is upside down. Even being in captivity, we've lost. And the things we're going to see are very losing, what do you call that? We've lost. I can't say it another way. And so just knowing that there's hope beyond this, and there's something so much greater, bigger, and all that,
So I think at this point, to go with that, and then I've forgotten, Randy has a comment. I'll get to you in just a second. I'll get the microphone to you, though, or Tom will. I think to your point, Scott, what we are seeing here is instantly you open chapter 8, and it feels very reflective of chapter 7. It's almost like, are we telling the same story again, but with different characters? Like, what's going on? Part of this is chapter 7 was written in Aramaic, so who is that to? All nations, all kingdoms, all kings. And then he opens up to chapter 8, and he goes back into Hebrew, and now he's honing in a little bit. We're only going to get 2 beasts. But the message is still the same. This is a powerful beast. And in some ways defies nature. There are multiple predators of rams. Wolves, bears, mountain lions, all these different things that could absolutely devour a ram. And yet what is he doing? There's nothing that can stop him. And so there is this you open up almost in this sense of, wait, have we lost hope again? And then we'll get the hope back into the text later, as you pointed out. Randy.
I think Scott took most of what I had to say, but I think it is, you're right about the timing, and it's insightful to switch to Hebrew, because it is for these Hebrew people that the world that they've known even in captivity is kind of dissolving as the Babylonian Empire kind of crumbles quickly after Nebuchadnezzar's death, and you got the Nabonidus and now Belshazzar, and it's going to fall apart. And now they have this vision that kind of tells them what's going to happen, and some of this is 300 years more in the future that's going to happen.
Sure.
He's spanning a big period of time, but ultimately I think it is a message of hope.
Yeah.
And it helps with that 547 timing that you mentioned, because it's before Cyrus and all that.
Yeah. He's telling them almost as if to say, when you see these things, don't be surprised. Right? Aaron and then Ida. Looked over and saw a couple hands. Go for it.
Yeah, and there are 2 horns on the ram. One is higher. They're both high, so they're both, powerful and strong. It's not like one's a small little horn and one's a real big one.
Yeah.
They're both good size, but one is larger than the other. The one that's larger comes after. So this is just a reference back to the Medes and the Persian kind of empire.
Yeah, we'll
And
get to that when
with-
he does.
Okay.
Yeah, but what you're seeing in the vision is accurate. There's this power imbalance even within that ram. That there's one side that's more powerful than the other, and it comes at an odd time. These horns don't grow at the same time, which would be a more natural thought. There's this one that comes up, and then another that comes that's larger, but they're both big, right? I mean, it's a very intimidating ram. These massive horns of protection and destruction, and they're good at using it. Go ahead, Ida.
I'm sorry, maybe I'm just a pessimist, but where's the message of hope in here?
Not yet in 1 through 5, 1 through 4.
Oh, so we're cheating.
Yeah, well, yeah. I kept saying we'll get to that. It'll get there. So we will get there. Anything else here in 1 through 4? What was the mentality of the ram? He did as he pleased, and he became great. Now, even without knowing the outcome, have we seen people who do as they please and become great? And sit back and think, how are they doing so well? And it seems like I'm not getting anywhere. And you can imagine the captives thinking the same thing. We're being faithful to God, and we're here, and these nations are rising up and keep conquering us. What's going on? And so he's working through that with them. Steve, and then we'll move on to the next section here.
This whole symbol, the horn,
Yeah.
in Luke it says, and raised us a horn of salvation.
Yeah, and we see this symbol then replicated throughout Scripture where you have a horn that will come and do conquering, and it's a horn of salvation. Absolutely. All right, let's go into verse 5, continue the vision. As I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west, across the face of the whole earth, without touching the ground. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came to the ram with 2 horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal. And he ran at him with his powerful wrath. I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him, and struck the ram and broke his 2 horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground and trampled on him. And there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. Then the goat became exceedingly great. But when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And instead of it, there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. All right? Take a moment, consider that. What does this vision elicit within us, and what do we notice about it? We'll talk in a moment. All right. What stands out to you? What questions do you have? Ida? Oh, you got to wait for the mic. We don't get to cheat, remember?
Vicious.
Vicious. A goat being vicious. Yes. All right. What else do we notice? Aaron?
A flying goat? being vicious?
Yeah.
And
now
more,
it kind of looks a little more supernatural, doesn't it?
more powerful than the ram.
Okay, let's talk about that. If you were to throw a ram and a goat in a fighting ring, who's going to win? Well, if the goat's flying, yes, the flying goat. But who would you expect in nature? The ram. Its horns are massive. It is built for head-on collisions. It would win against almost any car we have, all right? So, but this goat, who is obviously smaller, has smaller horns by nature, we would see a goat and go, there's no way that thing's winning. Especially when the ram has been running to the west and to the north and to the south, and nothing can stand in its way, and you're going to send a goat? What do you mean by that? There's no way this could work. But it is flying. And it's a unicorn. It has one horn. Okay, how does it, now it looks a little less natural. It doesn't have the two small horns. And it's coming and it goes after that ram with all it's got. And what's it able to do? Destroy him to the ground. First, by taking out both horns. Ripping horns off a ram, I've not tried. I can't imagine it's easy. Yeah, and we're going to see as we get into the text later, he clarifies what this single horn is. It's a single king. And when we get to the after, like 15 and after, we'll play with who these actually play out to be for sure. But yes, you are correct. Scott.
I think this is a question as much as anything, because I hadn't thought about the goat, the ram coming from the east. But since that's the case, if that's coming from the world and into the God's area, now you've got this goat coming from the west. Mm-hmm. So does that mean that this one is raised up by God and sent, and then maybe that's where the conquering and all that's coming from? Just a thought.
Well, and certainly what we see to continue that narrative, I think, Scott, as I'm with you on that, is that when he was strong in verse 8, it's not that he came and did all that he wanted and he became mighty, which is what happened with the first one, right? He did as he pleased and became great. Now this goat comes along, flying. We don't even know that it has wings. It's being powered by something. And it's coming from the west, typically a sign of coming from the presence of the Lord. And it's coming and it is made strong. It becomes strong. We don't know how. The text doesn't say he did it on his own accord. And so it just became exceedingly great. And so I think there is some understanding here that God is designing this. That God is using this goat, or as we will talk about, this nation, to further the work that he needs to have furthered on the earth. Mark.
I completely agree with that, because there is an absence of God in any of these descriptions. We see they have their own power. Their power is their own, and they exercise it with impunity. But there's no attachment to God whatsoever. I would imagine Daniel recognizing that these are powers that are, it's not Israel, it's somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a power behind it. If nothing else, then it's not touching the ground. It's flying, right? That is, and then Mark's going to go again here.
That word goat actually means a prancing animal. That's the way if you've seen goats, that's how they move.
Okay, and so it's a more general term. They had a more limited language in Hebrew. There's 2,300 words in their whole language, and we have 100-something thousand. So yeah, we're going to have more words to describe one of theirs. And I've forgotten your name. Robin.
So I think it's interesting if you look at the theme of Daniel, that God rules in the kingdoms of men and he raises up who he desires. And It's when these kings become strong and full of themselves. You see what he did to Nebuchadnezzar, but
Right.
God, he's always making the point. I'm the king, and I'm the one that does it. So when these kings, he uses them for his purpose, but then when they become strong and raise themselves up against him, then he brings somebody else.
Right. Yeah. When they become too self-righteous and too large and overwhelming the earth, he maintains that control by bringing someone else in. And that's the ram here, or the goat that's coming in. And Daniel's seeing it in this vision. Okay? What else do you see 5 through 8? What's the mindset of the goat? We looked at the mindset of the ram. Wrathful, enraged. He is casting him down and trampling on him, right? He is just exuding his power. And then, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so in line with that, where he has furious power in verse 6, which is interesting to me. Like, if you know I don't want to jump ahead again, but you know Alexander the Great versus the Persians, there's the kind of power behind rage.
Yeah.
And you know, this is expressed here.
Yeah, and it's interesting how, I mean, you can imagine if you're thinking of the idea of a prancing animal, what does that look like when it goes into powerful rage? It's no longer prancing along. It is like full force, running with 2 hooves on the front and then 2 on the back, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. I mean, it is just going. It's not prancing along loving the mountains, okay? It's going. And that's the wrath that he sees. That's what he's describing as wrath and anger. You saw a hand. I didn't see who it was. Ida.
Since we're breaking rules,
I moved past the rule break, so...
there was someone that really wanted revenge. Really bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And we will play with that when we get to the latter part of this book. Okay, what else happens in the vision? There's one piece that we haven't talked about towards the end here. Lito and then Aaron. If Aaron still wants to after this.
With the greatness of the God, and strong and young, still was torn down.
Yeah, he was still broken down. And specifically, what happens? Yeah, Aaron's holding up the number 4. We get the unicorn becomes a quadricorn, right? He goes from 1 horn to 4. And we see that play out in history. Again, we'll talk about that when we get to the latter part of the section. But imagine watching an animal who's supposed to have 2 horns, comes on the scene flying, charging across the land with 1 horn. That looks weird. And then when he's established himself in power, he loses the thing that gave him power, and now it's 4 horns? Imagine that vision happening in your dream. You waking up going, yep, that makes sense. Got it. Lisa?
So the 4 winds of heaven, are they specifically east, south, northwest, or is there something more to that?
Yeah, I think the idea here is that we see God able to gather the 4 winds of the earth. We see the idea here then being the 4 winds are a descriptor of the whole of creation. And so he's able to, God controls all 4 winds, but what do these guys do? In terms of a nation or a kingdom, we now get 4 horns, and they split up and take 4 parts of the kingdom. And so the whole earth, as they would have called it, reigning the whole earth, well, now it's split into 4. And as we know, a house divided against itself cannot stand, and that's going to be their demise. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Now the fun section. Verse 9 through 14. Let's see what we can do here. Out of one of them, that's one of the 4 horns, right? Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. it grew great, even to the host of heaven. And some of the host and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on them. It became great, even as great as the prince of the host. And the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown, and a host will be given over to it together with the regular burnt offering because of transgression, and it will throw truth to the ground, and it will act and prosper. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, "For how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over of the sanctuary and hosts to be trampled underfoot?" And he said to me, "For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state." All right, take a minute. Come up with your questions or comments, and then we'll talk. Okay. What do you notice or what questions? Ida's going to start us off.
I'm sorry, but this refers to just before. I just wanted to point out, make sure everybody, maybe I just missed it, but you have this other horn, or this goat that's becoming exceedingly great, exceedingly strong, and boom, it's broken.
Yeah.
It's not like they came against it and they warred and it broke. It's
Right.
just, it broke. And
Yeah.
I think that's important to remember for later on.
Yeah, and so what we see then is both animals suffer the same thing. That in an instant, their horn's broken off, right? So the ram, both horns are gone. The goat, there goes a horn. And so good, I appreciate that. Okay, what then do you see about 9 through 14? Really, maybe hone in on 9 through 12. Continue the vision. Let's finish that off, 9 through 12. Miss Kay has something for us.
Well, it says this little horn grew great toward the south, east, and glorious land. So is the glorious land Israel?
It would be Canaan.
Yeah.
And so if there is toward the south, toward the east, where's the glorious land? It's to the west, confirming what we were talking about, that out of the west came the goat. It would be that idea of the land in the west. So Israel, Canaan.
And then it grew great to the host of heaven. Is that God?
Okay, so now we have the big question in this section. Who is, so let's clarify. We have a fifth horn popping up, right? So we have a horn coming out of one of the horns. And we have then it becoming great and glorious and conquering and out towards the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. And when it grows great, it grows so great that it's growing toward the host of heaven. Who is that? God's people. God was an option. Ida? She sinks back a little bit after I called her.
I'm just thinking that the host of heaven, the stars, the sun, the moon, are all used in many different ways in the scriptures, and most of it indicates some type of authority. And especially, you remember when Joseph had his dream of his brothers, and they just loved him because of that. And the sun and the moon and the stars bowed down in front of him.
Right.
And so, while at that point they were God's people, but still it's that idea of authority in the world.
Yeah, and what it's pointing to kind of maybe add to that language would be, where is true authority? It's in heaven. When we look to the stars in the sky, we should be going, there is something far greater than what we see on this earth. There's an authority in the heavens. And that host of heavens, the ones who are out there, whatever that is, they are great. And some of them were thrown down, it says. We'll continue the thought, but Randy, and then if we have time, we'll get to Lito here.
Just an observation, it just seems there's always another horn.
Yeah.
They just keep growing. I mean,
Yeah.
what is that, power, something about a vacuum. It just is, it detests the vacuum. It's always, but it never measures up to the commander of the host. It's
Yeah.
always given and taken away the power. So.
Good, yeah. And so continuing then on this idea of the host of heaven, we see a unique piece of that puzzle come into play. In verse 11, what do we get? The prince of the host of heaven. So we have a ruler among rulers. A ruler in the authority, a ruler in the heavenly places, if you want to put it that way. Now, we don't get the full description of it until later. We'll get some more verbiage. But the idea here, I think, just to kind of look forward a little bit, is that the hosts could include, according to verse 24, mighty men and people who are the saints. That there is this massive host of mighty men and people who are the saints. Okay, now we've got nations and God's people are the hosts of the heaven, or the host of heaven, and there is a prince over all of them. And that prince is what he's attaining towards, that horn. He comes and he becomes great. He is great, even as great as the prince of the host. Literally? No, we're in a vision. And it's going to feel like when kingdoms and kings rise up and people come to power, that they're gaining power like the prince of the host. It feels like they're becoming great beyond human strength. He's reaching toward the sky like they did at the Tower of Babel. He's reaching for everything that he doesn't have control or authority to grasp. And so we have this prince of the host, and what happens? Lito had a comment. Sorry, I forgot to come back to you, Lito.
I was greatly kind of thinking about the prince of the host, as we have mentioned, the chosen people, the God's people, or saints, a massive of them. But the prince of the host is overall in authority over them, and is taking the burnt offering. I was wondering about the burnt offering. Is this the old custom in the old traditions of the Israelites?
Good. And I think that's where we really start to unlock why this came to the Hebrew nation and came to the Hebrew language. Because what's happening to the prince of the host? His sanctuary is being destroyed, and it is being overthrown. And a host will be given over it together. There's going to be a new reign that conquers that area. Uh-oh. I'm Babylon. I'm the Jews. We'll come to Mark here in just a second. I'm the Jewish people, and I'm in captivity. And I'm watching king after king raise up and conquer. And I'm thinking, oh, good, God's giving us a vision, and it's going to give us hope. And what happens? He says it's actually going to get worse. My sanctuary is going to be destroyed. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Robin just said to me, isn't the prince of the host Jesus? And I read it, and you would want Jesus to be the prince of the host. How can somebody be as strong as Jesus? They're not. That's like you said. This is the appearance of things. This is the way things are going to look.
Yes.
It's not going to get better right away.
Well, and even if we do call it Jesus for a second, the prince of the host is not conquered here, just his sanctuary. The prince of the host is not destroyed here, just his sanctuary. So that is a piece to keep in mind. All right, that's the time we have. We'll get into 13 and on and whatever else we need in that section when we meet next week. I appreciate your comments and your attention.